So the tiny human finally gives up.
No.
He's removing his life support armor. This armor was never protecting me. It was protecting all of you.
Laughter erupted from the colossal warlord, a guttural sound that shook the combat arena. He believed the human's bulky, hissing suit was the only thing keeping the fragile creature alive in this harsh galactic environment. He was dead wrong. That armor wasn't protecting the human, it was protecting the aliens. The Dreadnought vanguard of Kol hung in the orbit of Jupiter like a jagged obsidian dagger, its massive railgun batteries pointed squarely at the inner Sol system. Aboard the flagship, in a cavernous throne room bathed in harsh, blood-red lighting, the fate of Earth was being decided. Warlord Turgal of the Kholian Empire lounged on his elevated command dais. He was a terrifying specimen, standing nearly 9 feet tall, his gray skin covered in thick, chitinous bone plates. To the Kholians, size was the ultimate metric of evolutionary success. They had conquered a dozen star systems on the back of their sheer physical dominance. They were the undisputed apex predators of the Orion Cygnus arm, evolved on a sprawling world of sparse atmosphere and low gravity, which allowed them to grow to titanic proportions. Standing before the warlord's dais were 2 humans. To the gathered Kholian elite, they looked like pathetic, mechanized insects. Captain Gregory Mitchell and Corporal Wyatt Jensen of the United Nations Space Command stood heavily in the center of the chamber. They were entirely encased in Lockheed Martin Mark IV diplomatic rigs. The suits were massive, clunky monstrosities of brushed titanium and thick rubberized joints, hissing constantly with pneumatics and coolant loops. To the aliens, the humans appeared so fragile that they required life support wheelchairs just to stand upright on a Kholian vessel. "Your silence is amusing, Captain Mitchell," Turgal rumbled, his voice translated through the booming speakers of the amphitheater. "But it will not save your homeworld. The Kholian Armada has bypassed your pathetic outer defenses. We have disabled your orbital platforms. Earth is exposed." Mitchell, barely visible behind the thick, tinted polycarbonate visor of his rig, remained perfectly still. The servos in his suit whined slightly as he shifted his weight. "Warlord Turgal, we were sent under the flag of truce to negotiate a cessation of hostilities. The UN Security Council is prepared to offer mineral concessions in the Kuiper Belt, but Earth will not surrender." Turgal erupted into a booming, clicking laugh. The sound echoed around the chamber, joined by the jeers of the hundreds of Kholian officers and champions lining the tiered viewing galleries. "Negotiate?" Turgal spat, leaning forward, his yellow eyes narrowing. "You mistake our presence for a diplomatic mission. We do not negotiate with subspecies. We cull them. We enslave them. Look at you. You are tiny, soft, and brittle. You require these pathetic metal shells just to survive the atmospheric pressure of my ship." It was a common misconception among the galactic community. Because Earth had secluded itself behind layers of diplomatic red tape and digital firewalls, very few alien species had ever actually visited the blue planet. The Kholians assumed that because the humans wore massive, pressurized suits during diplomatic encounters, it was because they were weak. Beside Mitchell, Corporal Wyatt Jensen let out a slow breath. Inside his suit, the heads-up display flickered with biometric data. "Captain," Wyatt muttered over the private encrypted comms line, "they're not going to take the deal. DARPA Command said they wouldn't, but we had to try." "Maintain protocol, Wyatt," Mitchell replied softly. "We play this out by the book. Give them every chance to walk away." Turgal gestured with a massive clawed hand. From the shadows of the throne room, an automated gravity cage descended from the ceiling. Inside, suspended in midair by kinetic inhibitors, was Dr. Evelyn Harper, Earth's chief ambassador to the outer colonies. She was bruised, lacking her environmental suit, wearing only standard civilian fatigues. She was shivering, struggling to breathe the thin, synthesized air of the Dreadnought. "Evelyn," Mitchell said, stepping forward, his suit clanking heavily against the metallic deck. 2 Kholian guards immediately crossed their energy pikes, blocking his path. "We captured your ambassador's transport vessel 3 cycles ago," Turgal sneered. "She has proven remarkably fragile. A few days in our gravity, breathing our air, and she is already collapsing. This is the weakness of your kind. You belong in the dirt." Wyatt clenched his fists inside the thick gauntlets of his suit. The hydraulic servos protested with a loud whir. "Captain, I'm getting real tired of this guy." Mitchell's eyes locked onto the warlord. Release her, Turgle. That is a direct violation of the interstellar armistice. There is no armistice with the weak, Turgle declared, standing to his full, terrifying height. I will show my fleet the true frailty of humanity. I will broadcast your humiliation to your home planet, and then we will burn your cities to ash. The Warlord pointed a massive finger directly at Corporal Wyatt Jensen. You, the loud one inside the metal shell. We have a tradition in the Kholian Empire, the right of dominance. You will face my prime champion in the combat pit. When he breaks you open and crushes the soft meat inside, Earth will know despair. The floor of the throne room retracted, revealing a sunken gladiatorial arena composed of hard light barriers and scarred iron plating. The Kholian audience roared in anticipation, stamping their massive digitigrade feet against the metal decking. The sound was deafening, a rhythmic pounding of impending violence. Corporal Wyatt Jensen was roughly shoved into the pit by the guards. His heavy Lockheed rig stumbled, the stabilizers hissing wildly to keep him upright. He caught himself, turning to face the gate on the opposite side of the arena. Above, Captain Mitchell stood near the edge, his visor dark, watching silently. Evelyn Harper gasped for breath in her cage, her eyes wide with terror as she looked down at Wyatt. "Wyatt, don't!" she rasped. "They're too strong!" The heavy iron gate on the far side of the pit groaned open. Out stepped Gorvath, the prime champion of the Kholian Empire. If Turgle was terrifying, Gorvath was a nightmare given flesh. He was a towering beast of muscle and bone plating, carrying no weapons, only his bare, heavily armored fists. He was easily 10 feet tall, weighing nearly a ton in Earth measurements. His skin was a mottled crimson, and his jaw was lined with jagged, protruding tusks. He pounded his chest, letting out a roar that sent vibrations through the deck plates. "Tear the metal apart, Gorvath," Turgle commanded from his throne. "Show them the might of coal." Gorvath charged. The distance between them closed in seconds. Wyatt tried to raise his arms, but the Lockheed Mark IV suit was never designed for melee combat. It was a diplomatic and hazardous environment rig, prioritizing life support and shielding over agility. Gorvath's fist, the size of a cinder block, smashed into Wyatt's chest plate. The sound of crunching metal echoed through the chamber. Wyatt was lifted off his feet and sent flying backward, crashing heavily against the hard light barrier. The impact shattered the suit's left optical sensor and severely dented the titanium alloy of the breastplate. Alarms instantly blared inside Wyatt's helmet. Warning: structural integrity compromised. Primary servos offline. Coolant leak detected. The alien crowd erupted into hysterical, clicking laughter. It was a slaughter. A joke. Gorvath didn't relent. He stalked forward, grabbing Wyatt by the shoulder pauldron and hauling him into the air with one hand. The alien champion grinned, exposing rows of razor-sharp teeth, before delivering a devastating headbutt to Wyatt's visor. The thick polycarbonate cracked. Spiderwebs of fractured glass obscured Wyatt's vision. Blood tricked down his forehead from the violent whiplash, stinging his eyes. He groaned, tasting copper. "Look at the human!" Turgle bellowed, laughing so hard he had to grip the arms of his throne, trapped in a broken shell, unable to even stand under the might of a true warrior. "This is your defender, Earth?" Gorvath threw Wyatt to the ground like discarded trash. The human hit the deck with a heavy metallic crash. His right leg servo sparked violently, locking the knee joint in place. Thick, white coolant fluid bled out onto the iron floor. Dr. Harper sobbed from her cage. "Please, stop! He yields!" "There is no yielding in the right of dominance," Turgle sneered. "Finish him, Gorvath. Peel him out of the can." Inside the broken helmet, Wyatt blinked blood out of his eyes. He took a deep, ragged breath. He looked up at Captain Mitchell, who was standing perfectly still at the edge of the pit. "Cap." Wyatt coughed over the private comms. "The rig is shot. Right leg is fused. Life support is failing." "I see it, Corporal," Mitchell's calm voice replied in his ear. "We gave them the diplomatic option," Wyatt said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all traces of pain. "We did," Mitchell agreed. Under DARPA Protocol Goliath, Section 4. If a diplomatic envoy is engaged in lethal, unprovoked hostile action and the Aegis containment rig is compromised, you are authorized to disengage environmental seals, Mitchell finished, his voice cold and hard as steel. You are authorized to remove the limiters, Corporal. Show them why we wear the suits. A slow, feral grin spread across Wyatt's bloody face. He reached down to the heavy, glowing release latch on the center of his chest plate. To the Kholians, the suits were life support. They assumed humans were fragile, weak-boned creatures that needed powered armor to survive in a galaxy of giants. What the galaxy didn't know, what the UN had gone to great lengths to hide, was that Earth was classified as a Category 9 death world. Earth's gravity was crushing. Its atmosphere was thick, volatile, and highly corrosive, packed with dangerous amounts of oxygen. Humanity hadn't evolved to be delicate. They had evolved to survive a planetary meat grinder. Their bones were dense as concrete. Their fast-twitch muscle fibers were coiled springs of kinetic terror. The Lockheed Mark IV wasn't powered armor meant to enhance a human's strength. It was a weighted containment suit. It was built to deliberately restrict their movements, simulate Earth's heavy gravity, and dampen their strength so they wouldn't accidentally break alien diplomats in half when shaking their hands. "Understood, Captain," Wyatt said. With a sharp twist, Wyatt yanked the emergency manual override. A loud, piercing hiss echoed through the arena as the pressure seals on Wyatt's suit blew. Gorvath, who had been stepping forward to deliver the killing blow, paused. He tilted his head, watching in confusion as the heavy titanium plating of the human suit began to split apart. Turgal leaned forward, his laughter dying in his throat. "What is the creature doing? Has it chosen suicide?" "It is exposing itself to our atmosphere, Warlord," one of the Kholian generals shouted from the gallery. "The frail thing knows it cannot win. It prefers the quick death of suffocation." The massive chest plate of the Lockheed rig fell away, crashing to the floor with a heavy thud that actually dented the deck. Next came the heavy arm gauntlets, popping off with the hiss of dying hydraulics. Wyatt kicked his legs, violently shedding the thick, locked leg braces. Finally, Wyatt reached up and grabbed the shattered helmet. He pulled it off and tossed it aside. It rolled to Gorvath's massive feet. Wyatt stood in the center of the arena, wearing only a sweat-soaked, form-fitting black compression undersuit. Compared to the 10-foot, armor-plated alien champion, he looked absurdly small, barely 6 feet tall, with no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs. But as Wyatt took his first breath of the Kholian Dreadnought's air, something changed. The air on the ship was synthesized for Kholian biology. It was incredibly thin, mimicking the high-altitude, low-pressure environments of their homeworld. To Dr. Harper, a civilian unaccustomed to athletic conditioning, it was suffocating. But to Corporal Wyatt Jensen, a Tier 1 Earth Special Operator, taking a breath in this environment felt like taking off a heavy backpack after a 20-mile march. Without the crushing 1G gravity of Earth pulling him down, without the 400-pound containment suit restricting his joints, Wyatt felt impossibly, almost terrifyingly light. He rolled his shoulders. His neck popped. He looked up at Gorvath and spat a mouthful of blood onto the pristine iron floor. "You talk entirely too much," Wyatt said, his voice easily carrying through the thin air. Gorvath roared, insulted by the tiny creature's defiance. The alien lunged forward, bringing both of his massive, club-like fists down in a devastating overhead hammer strike designed to flatten the human into paste. The strike hit the deck with the force of a bomb, shattering the iron plating and sending shockwaves through the arena. Dust and debris exploded outward. The Kholians cheered. Turgal smirked. But when the dust cleared, Gorvath's fists were buried in the metal floor, and the human was not under them. Turgal blinked. Where did it go? "Too slow," a voice whispered from behind the champion. Gorvath turned, his yellow eyes widening in shock. Wyatt was standing behind him. The alien hadn't even seen him move. It was physically impossible for a creature to move that fast. It defied the laws of biomechanics. With a roar of fury, Gorvath swung a massive backhand, aiming to decapitate the human. Wyatt didn't dodge. He simply raised his left arm. Crack. The alien's forearm, thick as a tree trunk and covered in dense bone plating, slammed into Wyatt's raised forearm. The sound that followed wasn't the squelch of human meat being crushed. It was the sharp, horrifying sound of Kholian bone shattering. Gorvath let out a shrieking wail, stumbling backward and clutching his mangled arm. The bone plate had completely collapsed, under the impact. Absolute stunned silence fell over the viewing gallery. The cheering stopped instantly. Turgal rose slowly from his throne, his jaw slacking. "What? What is this trickery?" Turgal demanded, his voice trembling. "Shoot it! He has a hidden energy shield!" "No shield, Warlord," Wyatt said, stepping forward. His gait was completely different now. In the 06G environment of the alien ship, every step he took possessed the coiled kinetic energy of a striking viper. Just physics. See, you big guys grew up on a planet with gravity so low you could float. You got tall, you got big, but your bones? They're like bird bones. Porous. Hollow. Gorvath snarled through the pain, lunging forward with his remaining good arm, attempting to grab Wyatt and crush him in a one-handed grip. Wyatt moved like a blur. He stepped inside the alien's guard, his speed completely untracked by the Kholian visual cortex. He drove a right hook directly into Gorvath's sternum. The impact sounded like a cannon shot. The sheer force of the blow, driven by muscles, evolved to operate under the crushing gravity of Earth, caved in Gorvath's heavy chest plate. The 10-foot alien was literally lifted off his feet, launched backward through the air. He slammed into the hard light barrier of the arena, his massive body shorting out the energy field before collapsing to the floor in a heap of broken bone and purple blood. Gorvath twitched once, and then lay perfectly still. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the hum of the ship's engine seemed to quiet down. Hundreds of Kholian warriors, the most feared conquerors in the galaxy, stared in sheer, unadulterated horror at the tiny, unarmored human standing in the center of the pit. Wyatt cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing loudly in the silent room. He looked up at the warlord's dais. "Now," Wyatt said, his eyes burning with a terrifying, predatory intensity. "Let's talk about those negotiations." The deafening silence within the cavernous throne room of the Dreadnought Vanguard of Khol stretched into an agonizing eternity. Hundreds of elite Kholian warriors, each a veteran of a dozen planetary conquests, stood entirely frozen. Their secondary eyelids blinked in rapid, uncontrollable succession, a biological response to profound cognitive dissonance. The absolute impossibility of what they had just witnessed short-circuited their predatory instincts. Gorvath, the prime champion, the undisputed apex of their genetic engineering and martial prowess, lay crumpled and broken on the scarred iron decking. He had been dismantled not by advanced plasma weaponry or orbital bombardment, but by the bare hands of a creature less than half his size. Warlord Turgal's massive hands gripped the armrests of his elevated throne so tightly that the reinforced plasteel began to groan and buckle under the pressure. His yellow eyes darted wildly between the motionless form of his greatest warrior and the diminutive, sweating human standing casually in the center of the gladiatorial pit. "What? What manner of deception is this?" Turgal stammered, the booming resonance of his voice replaced by a wet, rattling hiss. He turned his massive head toward his supreme tactical commander, a scarred giant named Vorkasha. "Sensors. Scan the creature. It must be utilizing a subdermal kinetic dampener, a microscopic energy field." Vorkasha frantically manipulated the holographic interface at his command console. The blue light illuminated his terrified features. "Warlord, the scans are identical to the previous telemetry. There are no energy fields. There are no cybernetic enhancements. The creature is entirely organic." Vorkasha swallowed hard, his vocal cords clicking nervously. "However, the atmospheric density and gravitational algorithms are registering an anomaly in the human's biometric output. The creature's skeletal density is registering at nearly 4 times that of standard Kholian infantry. Their muscular composition is entirely fast-twitch, hyper-condensed fiber. In the pit, Corporal Wyatt Jensen stretched his neck, enjoying the complete lack of physical resistance. Operating in the 06G environment of the Kholian Dreadnought felt akin to swimming in a pool of air. Without the crushing, relentless 9.81 meters per second squared of Earth's gravity pulling at his every cell, his body was operating at a terrifying level of efficiency. Up on the viewing edge, Captain Gregory Mitchell remained perfectly motionless inside his massive Lockheed Martin Mark IV diplomatic rig. The hissing pneumatics of his heavy suit echoed loudly in the quiet room. He toggled his external speakers, his voice projecting with cold, mechanized authority. "I attempted to warn you, Warlord Turgle," Mitchell stated, his tone devoid of any gloating or arrogance, which somehow made it infinitely more intimidating. "The United Nations Security Council did not send us in these containment rigs to protect us from you. They sent us in these rigs to protect you from us." Mitchell tapped a command sequence into his wrist gauntlet. Back on Earth, deep within the subterranean bunkers of the Pentagon, analysts from Palantir Technologies and defense contractors from Raytheon Corporation had spent months running predictive combat models regarding a potential ground war with the Kholian Empire. The mathematical results had been devastatingly conclusive. To understand the sheer disparity in physical capability, one had to examine the foundational physics of evolution. Earth, a Category 9 death world, required its inhabitants to develop extreme durability just to survive a simple fall. The force exerted by a human punch in this low-gravity environment was a simple matter of physics. The kinetic energy delivered by Wyatt's strike could be calculated using the fundamental equation. However, because Wyatt's muscular acceleration was no longer impeded by Earth's atmospheric pressure and heavy gravity, his fist velocity, $v$, increased exponentially. Furthermore, the Kholian bone structure, evolved on a low-gravity world, possessed a significantly lower structural shear modulus. When Wyatt's dense, calcium-heavy fist collided with Gorvoth's porous chest plate, the force $F equals m, c dot a dollar, vastly exceeded the maximum tensile strength of the alien's biology, resulting in catastrophic structural failure. "Kill it!" Turgle suddenly shrieked, his panic finally overriding his shock. "Kill the human! All guards, fire at will! Do not let it move!" Around the perimeter of the arena, 24 elite Kholian Praetorians snapped out of their stupor. They raised their heavy, shoulder-mounted plasma casters, aiming directly at Wyatt. "Wyatt." "Weapons free," Mitchell said calmly over the encrypted comms line. "Copy that, Captain," Wyatt replied, a dangerous grin spreading across his face. Before the first Kholian guard could depress the firing mechanism of his weapon, Wyatt vanished. To the alien visual cortex, accustomed to tracking the sluggish, lumbering movements of giant predators, Wyatt's speed was completely incomprehensible. He didn't just run, he propelled himself with explosive, concussive force. His dense boots shattered the iron decking as he launched himself toward the nearest cluster of guards. The first plasma bolt seared through the empty space where Wyatt had been standing a fraction of a second prior, striking the opposite wall in a shower of molten sparks. Wyatt reappeared amidst a squad of 5 towering Praetorians. He didn't bother with complex martial arts or intricate maneuvers. He relied entirely on the overwhelming advantage of Earth's evolutionary brutality. He drove a simple, brutal uppercut into the jaw of the closest alien. The impact produced a sickening crack that echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. The 9-foot guard was instantly lifted off the ground, his neck snapping backward, at a fatal angle before he collapsed into a lifeless heap. The remaining 4 guards roared in a mixture of fury and terror, attempting to bring their heavy rifles to bear in close quarters. Wyatt pivoted on his heel, using the momentum to deliver a devastating roundhouse kick to the knee joint of the second guard. The leg folded backward with a wet crunch, sending the giant crashing to the floor, howling in agony. Without pausing, Wyatt reached out and grabbed the barrel of the third guard's plasma caster. With a single violent twist of his waist, he ripped the heavy weapon entirely out of the massive alien's grip, breaking the creature's fingers in the process. He spun the heavy weapon around like a baseball bat, smashing the reinforced stock directly into the 4th guard's chest plate. The armor completely caved in, sending the alien skidding across the deck plates. Panic erupted in the throne room. The viewing galleries descended into absolute chaos as Kholian officers and nobles trampled one another in a desperate bid to reach the exit bulkheads. The legendary conquerors of the Orion Cygnus arm were fleeing in absolute terror from a single, unarmored human. Dr. Evelyn Harper, suspended in her kinetic gravity cage, watched the carnage with wide, disbelieving eyes. She had read the classified DARPA briefings regarding Project Goliath. She knew the theoretical physics behind the containment suits. But witnessing the reality of human lethality unleashed in a low-gravity environment, was a profoundly terrifying experience. Wyatt moved like an apex predator among a flock of slow, clumsy sheep. "Captain!" Wyatt shouted over the din of screaming aliens and discharging plasma weaponry. He ducked under a wild, sweeping punch from a desperate Praetorian, responding with a devastating palm strike to the creature's ribcage. "The cage! I need to get the ambassador down." "Hold your position, Corporal," Mitchell replied. "I am engaging the release protocols." Mitchell, still encased in his massive Lockheed rig, raised his heavy titanium arm. While the suit lacked agility, it was equipped with state-of-the-art electronic warfare suites developed jointly by the National Security Agency and Boeing's Advanced Defense Division. A localized electromagnetic pulse, highly directional and calibrated to Kholian frequency bands, fired from Mitchell's wrist projector. The kinetic inhibitors suspending Dr. Harper's cage sparked violently, then shut down. The metal cage plummeted toward the deck. Wyatt immediately disengaged from his current opponent, crossing 30 feet of open deck in a blur of motion. He arrived directly beneath the falling cage, planting his feet firmly. He caught the heavy steel construct with both hands. The immense weight, which would have crushed a standard alien underneath it, merely caused Wyatt's boots to screech slightly against the iron floor. He gently lowered the cage to the ground and ripped the reinforced door off its hinges as if it were made of cheap plastic. "Ambassador," Wyatt said, offering her a blood-stained hand. "Time to go." Evelyn practically fell out of the cage, gasping for breath in the thin air, but managed to nod. "Thank you, Corporal. Thank you." Above them, on the command dais, Warlord Turgal watched the systematic destruction of his elite guard with mounting horror. His invincible armada, his terrifying reputation, all of it was disintegrating before his eyes. He realized, with a cold, sinking feeling in his primary hearts, that the Kholian Empire had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had poked a sleeping monster, assuming its stillness was weakness. The combat arena was a scene of absolute devastation. Broken Kholian warriors littered the floor, groaning in pain or lying completely motionless. Corporal Wyatt Jensen stood protectively in front of Dr. Evelyn Harper, his chest heaving slightly, though more from the adrenaline of the engagement than actual physical exertion. His black undersuit was torn in several places, revealing skin that was completely unbruised despite the heavy blows he had sustained earlier. Warlord Turgal stood alone on his command dais. His generals had either fled the chamber or were cowering behind the reinforced pillars of the throne room. The warlord drew his ceremonial executioner's blade, a massive, humming sword composed of superheated plasma contained within a magnetic field. "I will not be humiliated by a primate," Turgal roared, his voice cracking with desperation. He leaped from the balcony, a drop of nearly 40 feet, relying on his biology and the low gravity to cushion his fall. He landed heavily, the deck plating groaning under his immense weight. He pointed the glowing blade directly at Wyatt. "I am the Warlord of Khol. I have burned 1,000 worlds. I will sever your head and mount it on the prow of my ship." Wyatt didn't flinch. He gently pushed Ambassador Harper behind him. "Stay back, Doc. This guy is about to get really messy." Captain Mitchell, standing at the edge of the pit, finally moved. His heavy suit clanked as he took a step forward, the sheer mass of the rig shaking the floor. "Corporal, standard engagement rules. Do not terminate the hostile command structure unless absolutely necessary. We still require a signed treaty." "Understood, Cap," Wyatt replied, cracking his neck again. "I'll just soften him up." Turgal charged, swinging the massive plasma blade in a wide, horizontal arc designed to bisect the human at the waist. The heat radiating from the weapon was intense enough to singe Wyatt's hair even from several feet away. But sheer strength and a deadly weapon were useless if the wielder could not strike their target. Wyatt dropped effortlessly beneath the sweeping blade, the superheated plasma passing mere inches over his head. Before Turgal could reverse his momentum and bring the sword back around, Wyatt lunged forward, closing the distance instantly. He didn't aim for the warlord's armored torso. Instead, Wyatt targeted the structural weak points. He delivered a pinpoint, devastating strike to the radial nerve cluster located just beneath Turgal's right armpit. The The warlord let out a bellow of shock as his entire right arm instantly went numb. His massive fingers spasmed, and the heavy plasma blade slipped from his grasp, clattering uselessly to the floor and burning a hole through the iron decking. "My turn," Wyatt growled. He grabbed the thick, chitinous plating of Turgal's chest armor with both hands. Using leverage, his superior bone density, and the incredibly coiled power of his Earth-adapted musculature, Wyatt literally lifted the 9-foot warlord completely off his feet. Turgal's yellow eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror as he found himself suspended in midair, entirely helpless against the unbelievable strength of the tiny human. With a guttural shout, Wyatt slammed the warlord down onto the deck. The impact was catastrophic. The iron floor buckled inward, creating a miniature crater. Turgal's heavy bone armor cracked in multiple places, spiderwebbing with deep fissures. All the air was violently forced from the warlord's lungs in a pained, whistling wheeze. Wyatt stepped onto Turgal's massive chest, pinning the giant alien to the floor. The human leaned down, his face mere inches from the warlord's terrified visage. "You called us soft," Wyatt whispered, his voice cold and menacing. "You called us brittle. Let me explain something to you, Turgal. Earth isn't a peaceful paradise. It's a meat grinder. Our gravity crushes our bones into steel. Our atmosphere is a toxic cocktail that forces our cells to adapt or die. We didn't build these suits to hide from the galaxy. We built them so we wouldn't accidentally break the rest of you fragile bastards in half when we tried to shake your hands." Wyatt pressed his boot down harder, causing the cracked armor beneath it to groan dangerously. "Now, you are going to sign the treaty. You are going to withdraw your armada from the Sol system. And if a single Kholian vessel ever crosses the Kuiper Belt again, we won't send diplomats in containment rigs. We will send our marines. Without the suits, do we have an understanding?" Turgal, gasping for breath, the sheer, crushing pressure on his chest threatening to collapse his primary hearts, could only manage a frantic, desperate nod. "Yes." The warlord gasped out, his pride utterly shattered. "We yield." The Kholian Empire yields to Earth. Captain Mitchell stepped down into the arena, his heavy suit moving with slow, deliberate purpose. He walked over to the defeated warlord and looked down through his tinted visor. "Excellent," Mitchell said smoothly. "Ambassador Harper has the datapad with the necessary digital signatures. I suggest you finalize the transfer immediately." As Turgal painfully reached up to authenticate the diplomatic surrender protocols on the ambassador's datapad, the Dreadnought's primary klaxons suddenly began to wail. Blinking red warning lights illuminated the ruined throne room. Commander Vorkasha, bleeding from a superficial wound on his forehead, frantically yelled from the command console, "Warlord! Massive hyperspace signatures detected. Just outside the orbit of the gas giant." Turgal coughed violently, looking up at Mitchell. "What is the meaning of this? I have surrendered." "That," Mitchell replied calmly, turning to look out the massive viewport of the throne room, "is our insurance policy." Outside, in the cold, dark void of space, the fabric of reality tore open. Massive hyperspace translation windows bloomed like silent, violent explosions. From the swirling vortexes emerged the true might of the United Nations Space Command. These were not diplomatic vessels. These were heavy dreadnoughts, sleek, black, and bristling with railgun batteries and nuclear torpedo tubes. They were flanked by hundreds of nimble attack cruisers and thousands of automated defense platforms. The ships bore the manufacturing hallmarks of Earth's greatest military contractors, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. They surrounded the Kholian Armada in a flawless, inescapable tactical net. "We never sent a single ship, Turgal," Mitchell explained, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "We sent our entire first fleet." They were holding in stealth formation, waiting for the outcome of this negotiation. "If you had killed the corporal, or the ambassador, you would not have survived the hour." Turgal stared out the viewport at the massive human armada, then looked back down at the tiny, unarmored human who was still standing with his foot planted firmly on his chest. The warlord realized that the Kholian Empire had not just been defeated, they had been spared. Humanity possessed a terrifying duality, the restraint to hide their devastating nature behind metal suits, and the absolute power to annihilate anything that forced them to take those suits off. Protocol Goliath is concluded, Mitchell said, tapping his comms. Fleet Command, this is Captain Mitchell. The Kholian Empire has accepted our terms. Secure the perimeter and prepare for diplomatic escort. Wyatt finally stepped off the Warlord's chest, offering a mock salute to the terrified alien. He walked over to where his shattered containment suit lay on the floor. He picked up one of the heavy titanium gauntlets, tossing it lightly in his hands. "You know, Cap," Wyatt said, grinning. "I think I'm going to need a new rig. This one is looking a little worse for wear." "The taxpayers of Earth will be thrilled to cover the expense," Corporal, Mitchell replied, turning toward the exit. "Let's go home. The gravity here is giving me a headache." As the three humans walked out of the ruined throne room, leaving the broken Kholian elite in their wake, the galaxy fundamentally shifted. The Kholians, the apex predators of the stars, had learned a valuable lesson. Never judge a creature by the armor it wears. Because sometimes the armor isn't meant to keep the universe out. Sometimes it's meant to keep the monster in. If you enjoyed this thrilling sci-fi HFY adventure, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your fellow science fiction fans. Your support helps us create more epic tales of humanity, showing the galaxy what we are truly made of. Drop a comment below letting us know what you thought of Corporal Wyatt's incredible fight, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another epic upload. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.